Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Mayfield Felton, and you are here with Feet Planted LLC. In case you didn't know, it is Women's History Month, and I am interviewing, talking to some of the most amazing, phenomenal women in the STEM space that there is. And our next person is no different, Dr. Diann McCants. Okay, she threw a name in there that I didn't even know she was going to do. I was like, Warren, that is so cool. So welcome. We're just going to play a little bit of music to get us started. Again, music curated by my own partner in life, Mr. Al Felton. So pull up a chair, grab your notebook and a pen. I guarantee that you're going to want to take notes. All right. Welcome, Dr. McCants. How are you doing?
Hello, Karen. I am doing quite well today. It is a wonderful Friday here, and I'm in Northern Virginia, so it feels pretty good.
That is great. The theme for today and this month actually is Women Leading in Courage. And if you don't know anything about Feet Planted LLC, I created this platform so that I can edify, inspire, and encourage early career professionals as well as our young folks to pursue and to be interested in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and to inspire them to be courageous in their journey in life. That is why I am here. And I have been so blessed and just thankful to have met Dr. McCants along my work life journey. We both worked for the Department of Defense at one point in time. And so she has been instrumental in not just being a mentor, a friend, but she packs a wallop in terms of the skill set she brings to the STEM space as an African-American woman. So before we get into some Q&A, I would love for Dr. McCants to please tell us a little bit about yourself. Start from any vantage point you choose, but help our audience get to know who you are.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Wow, it's always kind of that interesting question, like, who are you? And you think about having to talk about a little bit about that. So I'll just start kind of a little bit of history. Growing up, my dad was in the Air Force, and my mom and we moved around quite a bit. So growing up, I got used to having to shift places, having to find your own way, find your voice as you went along. And so my dad retired in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So staying at home, I decided to attend the University of New Mexico. And when I went, a lot of times when you look at someone's life at the end, it seems like it was very well organized, very well orchestrated. But I went to the university, I had no idea of what I wanted to study and what I wanted to do. And some of it was, when I look back now, is that there's a lot of things I just didn't know and didn't have any idea of what some different things might be. So I ended up in psychology, which I think ended up being the best fit for me. And so I got my bachelor's degree from University of New Mexico, and then I went on to Stanford for my PhD and more focused in social psychology, because I cared a lot about those interactions and issues that impacted our lives, like stereotypes and discrimination, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. So being a social scientist, it's STEM, but in a little bit of a different way, because you do use the scientific method and that sort of thing to arrive at the answers to questions you might have. So after I graduated, I ended up working at the university. So my career span being in a university setting and then now being in the world of consulting. So for a number of years, I taught, I was in academic affairs, found that very, very interesting, very rewarding. But then I wanted to try what is it like to be outside of the university? So I started consulting. And then for the past 10 years, I've worked with a company called Strategic Analysis, supporting the STEM program in the Department of Defense. And so it's been really exciting being able to work with other STEM professionals to help bring programming to a range of people, because STEM is a foundation for so many of the things that we do in life. So I enjoyed the opportunity to work in that space.
Well, folks, she's being extremely modest. I happen to know her, and I also happen to have read her bio. What I love about your background in social science is that you have a very good, I'll call it a front row seat to human behavior in a lot of different environments. And so, can you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen in the academic environment and what you've seen in the workplace as it relates to STEM and women and some of the challenges that we are facing or have faced?
Sure. And that's actually a really, really good question. So I think for women, for one thing, kind of looking at it from a social science perspective, that we are impacted by stereotypes about our ability to be in that space. And we don't always recognize of how much it's impacting us. And so we can score lower on tests just because the stereotype gets in our head that women aren't supposed to be good at math, women aren't supposed to be good at science. And so so having to be able to help people mitigate those biases is really important to me. Helping people be able to see, like, I can do this. I am someone who can not only make it in this, I can excel in this, and I bring something unique. Yeah. And so, I think, and then social science really hits on a lot of the barriers that exist against that we come up against as women in STEM. And so it helps us also, if you understand them, then you can find good ways to overcome them, because too often we put a Band-Aid over a gaping wound as opposed to going back and really getting to the source and really healing that.
No, that's good. As usual, I tell people all the time, I'm going to be taking notes. I am the host as well as the student here. So one of the things that you said is that we all bring something unique to the table, and that is valuable. And it's a concept that is novel to some, but it is the absolute truth. So we're going to get to courage. This is kind of the buildup, folks. When we talk about some of the challenges and the mental struggles that we go through with the voice in our head and how we self-reject, what have you learned that might be able to help some of us do better in the STEM spaces that we're in and want to be in?
Yeah, so I think, like you say, the whole thing of really believing that you belong there, that you bring something unique to the table. Because I think about some jobs I've applied for. Some of them I've gotten, some of them I didn't. And when I didn't get a job, I recognized that, yeah, I still could have done that job. I'd have brought something different, but there are other people who are good as well. So I never kind of say, oh, no one else can do it except me. But I do feel like they missed something because they didn't get me. And so,
like that.
So I feel like, okay, I still bring something unique. The way I think about it, how my experiences come to play in that really make a difference, and have made me kind of who I am, and to be able to be confident in those things. And confidence, okay, now that I said that word, confidence is another thing. And so when I was in my younger part of my career, especially when I was in graduate school, I wasn't super confident. I didn't really believe in my ideas. And later then I was like, wow, you really did have good ideas. They were cutting edge, and you were afraid to step out on some of them. And so it helps if you have, that's where having a good mentor, having good people around you who say, Diann, no, that's not a bad idea. That's a good idea. You should pursue that. No one's really doing that right now. You should take, and that's sometimes something you come up against, is that your idea could be very radical. And so people aren't ready to buy in yet, but it doesn't mean it's not the idea for the day. So that's one of the things that I learned, is that, yeah, sometimes what you want to do is a bit radical. It's different because that's what you bring to the table. That's the uniqueness you bring. And it's rooted in the knowledge that you've gained over that time as well. And so that's where I feel like, yeah, at times when I didn't have that confidence, I feel like I've done a lot, but I could have done even more if I'd had that confidence at an earlier point in my career.
Wow. As you look back, that is really very good self-awareness, to be able to say, if I had done, if I had believed in myself, or if I had courage to speak up, then what would have happened? And that's why we are here having this conversation, because I want to highlight and celebrate women leading with courage, but also I want my audience and myself to understand that it's a process. It's a day by day type thing. And even in the STEM space, it's the process is a cyclic process of curiosity and understanding yourself and being able to step and repeat, leaning forward with courage, even at the expense of not getting it right or being considered radical. Because for some folks, being radical is not a positive thing. But when you are confident in yourself and you know what you bring to the space, then your radical ideas can shift and change people as well as be innovative. So I love it. One of the questions that we talked about is, what does courage mean to you? Now, you've already talked about confidence, breaking barriers, but explain what courage means to you and what it looks like for you.
That's always a good question. So, of course, being my nerdy self, I go back and you look up definitions to see kind of what courage. And when I looked at that, it talks about some of it persevering in light of the dangers you might face, or the obstacles that are there, or the barriers you come across, and not being afraid to sort of step out, even with those things kind of coming against you. So I thought about that and I said, yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But I want to add that for me, it also means, as you do that, being true to yourself in the process, being your authentic self as you do these things. Because a lot of environments that we find ourselves in, especially I would say as a Black woman, that a lot of times they want you to conform to some idea they have of what they think the right person in that job looks like, or the right what a STEM person looks like. I mean, they used to do these tests with children, and they would say, draw a scientist, and very rarely, it turned out that most kids would even draw a white man as a scientist, and so so we don't see ourselves there. So it's having the courage to say, yes, I can do this, I can persevere, and I won't lose myself in the process of doing that.
No, that's good. I speak often about I see future me, and every opportunity I have to tell my story, I tell it. And it begins with the image of someone on the other side of my view doing and talking about STEM or science. And that person mirrored who I was. It was either an African American woman, or my science teacher in high school, who was not African American, but these women projected and interested me. They made me consider what was possible for me. And that is so important in this day and age. We are in a time where there's so many opportunities for our students to learn, coming off of the pandemic, using their innovative ideas. So here's the question: how, in your mind, do we help the current generation become more courageous? What do you think needs to happen? I know that's a very broad brush, but you can answer it any way you choose.
No, that's good. But I mean, it's a good question. It's a good thing to think about, because what I have found is that a lot of times what we did growing up doesn't always reach the generation that's coming behind us. And so things that we responded to doesn't always kind of hit them where they are. So some of the things that I think make a difference is our willingness to be vulnerable in front of them, because they see a finished product at this point, and they need to be able to know that as we were coming through, it wasn't always that way. We had to work our way through a lot of obstacles, and even where we are right now, we've learned how to make it look like we've got it together, but we don't always have it together. And
no, we don't.
And so being willing to share that, being willing to say that, because for me, I think about it, if I didn't have a network of other, especially Black women professionals who were in my circle that you could go to you could say, do you believe that they said this? Do you believe that they still think that, Black people can't do X? Do they? And it's like if you show up at something, which I think many of us have had this experience, and a name like McCants, sometimes if they haven't seen my picture, they may not know who to expect. And then you show up and they're thinking like, oh, and they're picking their mouth up off the ground because they weren't expecting a Black woman to come in and to be able to say anything to them about things. So I find that having a network around me helps me to stay grounded, and then being able to share that with the the generation that's coming behind, and to take time, and I think very important to listen. To listen, because they're going through a lot of different things, how they're experiencing things. It may not seem like that much to us, but it's a lot to them. And sometimes too, I think for this generation behind us, they're not willing to kind of accept some of the crap that we accepted, that we had to work our way through.
Oh yeah.
So they feel like, and rightly so, they feel like our progress should be further than it is sometimes. And so sometimes when it's not, then they don't want to stay in there and fight that. They're tired. They don't want to keep being the first. And right now in our society, there are too many firsts still. The first Black woman who got a degree in chemistry from this program, the first Black woman who got, it's like there's just too many of those. And so sometimes they don't want to be that first. They want to be someplace where they can grow without having to take on that extra burden with that.
Wow, you talked about three things. That, first of all, listening. I am a woman who is evolving and maturing, and I can honestly say that had I listened more in my early years, to include graduate school, I would have not needed to be as courageous as I felt I needed to be, just from understanding my audience and listening to myself, not just to other people, being open and vulnerable, but listening to the person within. I was not courageous enough to say, it's okay to say that. And it's okay if you're wrong. You talked a little bit about, this generation. I'm not going to name them because I'm going to get them wrong. Generation X, Y, Z, millennials. I don't want to label, but I will say that when I go and talk to students and early career professionals, which is truly my target audience, and I listen to some of the things that they say, there's an edginess to their swag in terms of who they are, who they show up as. And one of the things that they say when I asked about courage, their word was boldness, to be bold in spaces. And as a seasoned professional, and as someone who, studies human nature and social science, I want to ask you this question based off of that comment. What has helped you be courageous in the spaces that you've been in? Because we know things are different. We know the playing field is still not level. We know about the gaps in wages, and yet we're still showing up. We're still recruiting. We're still hiring professionals. But what has helped you in the face of all the things that we've talked about, be courageous?
Yeah, I will say that it's definitely been an evolving process. That where I am now, definitely much more courageous than I was earlier on in my career. And part of that is that right now, I really believe that I've got something to say when I walk into a room. I believe that, it may not be earth shattering. It may not be, the end all be all, but I believe that I've got something to say that's going to contribute to the work that I'm doing, to the meeting that I'm in, to the people I'm talking to. I've got something to say. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, it's helped me to be courageous, to not feel like I have to go it alone. That there are people who I have in my network that help in so many ways, sometimes small, sometimes big. Sometimes it's enough just to say, wait, did I really hear the person say what I thought they said in that meeting? And they'll say, yeah, that's exactly what it was. Or that after you've been in something and you've been the only one in that setting, to kind of go somewhere else, to kind of get your strength back, to get refreshed from being around other people, like-minded people. And when I say like-minded, it doesn't mean that they're exactly, because I've got engineers, I've got biologists, I've got neuroscientists, I've got, the gamut in my circle. And so, but the like-mindedness is that they also know that they're willing to be on the front lines. They're willing to support and listen to your ideas and give you honest feedback. Because even though I feel like I'm pretty great, there are some ideas that maybe don't need to make the light of day. So, having people who are willing to, to kind of talk you through that. And then the third thing is my faith. And when I should have said too, when I was talking about my journey, is that I'm an ordained minister, and that impacts how I look at the world in a lot of ways. And being able to see the good in things, even when things look bad, is something that I think is very, very helpful. And then also because for me, with my faith, it's an opportunity to help in the way that I reach out to people. So that even though you may be in a group of people and they are saying the most ignorant things because they have no understanding about what your experience may be, of learning how to even sort of respond with compassion and love as you bring home the truth. And so that way, my goal is to have more people hear it as I possibly can. So those are some of the things I think that have helped me along the way.
You said a mouthful. I'm going to unpack a couple of things. First of all, every person that I have had on this platform always says something that resonates with me. So I'm going to repeat it. I believe that I have something to say to contribute. That is extremely powerful because we being women of color, often mute ourselves before it even gets air. We just cancel the thought and reserve it and keep it, and often don't share it. You said that you have a network, and I know a little bit about that network because you are someone in my network. The importance of having, I called it when I first started Feet Planet LLC last year, I call it Find Your Tribe. And I was actually speaking more to students, but it's applicable to everyone. Finding your tribe, finding people who are there for you, who can support you, and it creates this ecosystem that it doesn't mean that you're perfect, but you have a representative group that mirrors who you are a little bit by little bit, and that in itself will build your courage. So I just want to share that if you're out there, I'm looking at my green dot again. If you're out there and you do not have a tribe and you don't have a network of people, and I don't care whether you're a student, your early career professional, seasoned professional, it is important, it is imperative that you have a mentor and or folks that are able to help you and listen to you and give you that feedback. It's an exchange of ideas and thoughts as you go through, because it's extremely helpful because we don't always have it right. Dr. McCants, you already know that I'm a little bit of a hothead. And there have been moments where in the face of what I consider to be stupidity, ignorance, I want to respond, and I want to greet that with the same fervor that it was put towards me. But as a woman of faith also, I am reminded, which was your third point, that when we are courageous, we are able to see the good and work towards that and work past the negativity. So my next question, after I say all the things that I said, there's always a question at the end of it. And the next one is, how do you instill courage in others? Again, I'm going to just flat out say that you're leaving out a lot of jewels and gems in your background that I know have helped you be able to sit here with wisdom and talk with the authority that you do have. But along the way, you met some folks, you met some students, you taught. How did you instill courage into those folks? And it could be coworkers, it could be anyone.
Okay. That's a good question. And it's hard. It's funny because this topic of, being women who lead with courage and everything, when you first asked me, I'm thinking, is that me? I don't know. So having to even say like, wow, all right, you could have asked a lot of people. So I'm actually really grateful that you've given me the opportunity to be here. So I'm going to backtrack just a little bit in terms of getting to that point. And so when I was at Stanford getting my PhD, in the psychology department, there were a total of 3 Black students in the whole graduate program. And so it was a very isolating experience at the time. And I didn't realize just how much it was an isolating experience, because then talking about ideas was harder because people didn't understand what I was thinking. And I found it hard sometimes to do that. And so I ended up getting connected with the engineering students, and they had a critical mass, and I'll describe it like that: a critical mass of Black students in the engineering program. And partly there was a particular program, fellowship program, that they were coming through, and so that ended up being like the source of strength that I ended up taking while I was there. That if I couldn't find it in my department, so I had to find it elsewhere in the university. And then the nice story, the romance side, is that's where I ended up meeting my husband. And so down the road we ended up getting married, and that was kind of there. But the bigger point was that it was helpful to have a critical mass sort of surrounding you to be able to not feel so isolated. And I think that's a word that I think still impacts us sort of in STEM, that a lot of times you still end up being a small number in the group, a small number in your class, a small number in a program that you're in. And so I think instilling courage is to say, even then, hang in there. Even then, recognize that you do belong there. I think I've had opportunities to speak at some different programs that we run through the Department of Defense, our STEM, some of our partners, like the coding school, and I think it's CompuGirls. And here you have a lot of young Black and brown girls who are in that space, and then having an opportunity to talk to them. What I found made some of the most difference was, again, being willing to tell my story so that they could, number one, connect to you as more than just somebody who's sort of a talking head talking at them, that they can see like, okay, this person really cares. And then because you care, then you might tell them the truth. Because like some of them might say, well, I don't want to do that. That's not for me. And if you dig a little deeper, sometimes, everyone's got their path. Everyone has a path. So STEM isn't a STEM field career, isn't for everybody, but you need to have STEM skills in whatever it is that you go forward in. And so trying to get people to see, like, you don't want to run away from it because you got discouraged or because somebody else told you could do it. You want to be able to say that I can do this, I can persevere in this, so that I have all the opportunity open in front of me. And I think that's one of the things that I like to get people to see, is that if you start and you get that good foundation when you're younger, and you take those courses, even in college, and you kind of keep persevering, that it opens doors. It opens doors. So that I think the most discouraging thing is for someone to get down the road and to say, wow, I really do like engineering, but because I was afraid to take math, or because my friends weren't taking that level of math, I didn't do it. And so then when you get down there and you could have done it, it's not like it's ever really completely too late, but it's going to take some more work in order to kind of sometimes make up some ground. So I'm not sure if I completely answered your question. I might have talked around some things in there.
No,
but,
you did.
But that's what I was thinking about with that.
No, you did, and it reminded me of the younger me. It reminded me of several students that I've come across over the years in sharing our story, which is again why one of the reasons why I started Feet Planted LLC, is because we all have stories to tell. And when we're willing to be vulnerable and let folks know that we don't have it completely all together, nobody ever does, and that it's a journey, it allows people, it softens that hard exterior. You saw me taking some notes, and one of the comments or one of the statements that I just wrote down is having the courage to break the mold. We are in a society today that is very much monkey see, monkey do. I want to mirror what I see on Instagram, what I see on social media. I want to mirror what's popular because there's a validation deficit. And so we are in the STEM space, and we're encouraging and living our lives to encourage other BIPOC members and as well as other folks, Black, Indigenous, people of color, to consider STEM and to pursue STEM. And what I find is that we're competing with the notion that that's not for me. There are other ways that I can be validated, quicker ways, and I won't knock that. But it made me write down another question. So this is loaded, just letting you know. But in my heart, it's very genuine. Are we doing enough to encourage our students, our community to pursue STEM? And
Um, oh,
no, you're okay. Courage is a component of it. But are we doing enough?
um, I would say that the things that we're doing are great and are wonderful, but it is probably not enough. And here's some reasons that, as you're talking, I started thinking about some different situations. And one is I was talking to some parents at one point. It was at the Science and Engineering Festival, and it was a group of they had brought a group of kids, young Black kids, inner city kids from Baltimore, to this festival so they could see hands-on STEM. They could, and they were middle school kids that they brought in, and the kids were loving it. They were these teachers had a lot of love for these kids and were pouring their lives into the kids. And but the one teacher, as we're sitting down, we're eating and we're talking, and she says, the thing that always is hard, she says, is that while they're in this environment where we have them and we've got them surrounded by other people who look like them, we're keeping them going and they're really excited, and you start to see these, their ideas coming forward. But she said, but then the next challenge comes is that the way the system was set up, they could choose which high school to go to. And so they could have chosen a high school that was more STEM focused, or some of the other high schools, and they would lose a lot of the kids because they wanted to be with their friends, and their friends weren't necessarily interested in going into STEM. So even though they had made some friends there, but if they're kind of the people who they really hung out with were not there. So it's like, wow, there's just so many places where we need to try to, how do we counter that? How do we get them, get the community behind it, right? Because that needs to be more than just that kid trying to make that decision. That kid at that point needs to be propped up with others. Say, hey, let's get a group of you guys going to this school so that you can go there and you won't feel like you're isolated and you're by yourself. And in part, let's face it, if we have some challenges that come from outside of the community, and we have challenges that come within the community. So a lot of times, kids aren't encouraged to step out and be unique because they want everyone else to be like them. And so of trying to help kind of fight some of those things as well. So that's one thing. And then the second thing, it has to do with resources. And that's where that we need to do better, and we need to find ways to pour more resources into the areas that need it the most. And so, and some of that comes in when you talked about having a teacher, and this one, again, a good teacher, but very often in the poorest schools, you don't have the skilled math and science teachers in those spaces. And so there's a lot of teacher turnover because there's not enough support for the teachers. So that's another space where we're not doing everything we can do and need to find ways to kind of help with that.
No, I love that answer. As many in the audience or folks that are watching right now will learn, is that I have a diverse group of women to present to you, and a few of them are teachers, and that theme comes up quite often. And as a woman who is transparent and who endeavors to help move the needle just that much further, I often look at myself and I ask myself, what else can I be doing? And so I'm not going to say a commercial right now, but I am going to say that if you are interested in partnering with Feet Planted LLC, so that we can make more of a difference, I am definitely open to that. And I'll throw up my information at the end of this conversation. But I am checking on the resources and the challenges of being in the classroom and being able to encourage and reach our students, because there's so many other things vying for their attention. We talked about friendships. I've made posts about your circle, not just finding your tribe, but being very particular about who you call your tribe members. I mean, all of those things make a difference. I once heard that we're a friend of mine, I'll credit him, we're the sum total of our experiences, where we live, the books that we have read, and who we spend enough time around. And so I just want to echo that sentiment and also add that there needs to be courage to break the mold. That can also mean courage to step outside of your friend group when you see that the direction of those around you is not the direction that you can go to. I'm just going to share a quick story. I remember being in high school. I have a sister whom you're here. Well, actually, she was live recently. Who people always said, "You talk white." People always, talked about her, how she showed up in spaces, and it didn't deter her. It actually just made her that much more positive. But just remembering watching her as her younger sister, who wanted to fit in, who wanted to belong. When I tell you she broke the mold, she stood out. She was not a follower. And so when we talk about women leading with courage, we're also talking about childhood situations. There's a term for it. I know you know it because you're a social scientist, but these behaviors, these characteristics, they follow us through to adulthood. And so now we're in our careers, and life gets hard. There's politics. There's all sorts of things on the job in the STEM spaces that we're in, and those that stimulus doesn't change. It's still guarding your network, guarding your mind, and being able to encourage yourself when you face adversity. So I did that strategically so that I can ask Dr. McCants my next question. And that question is, why do you believe that it's important to have courage in the STEM space? One of the things I say all the time is that the messaging that I put forward can be applicable to pick a thing, to any field. Particularly though, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is and can be very challenging and arduous field to take on. So I'll let you answer that however you see fit.
Yeah, no, I think it is a great question because when we look at STEM, we look at STEM jobs, we look at people who are getting STEM majors. We're not represented well. We're not represented well as women, as people of color. We're just not there. And so if we're not there, it really hurts everything because innovation is spurred on by the diversity. And if you don't have a diverse group of people in there, then solving the questions, solving the challenges that we face in life, we're just not going to be able to do it in the way that we really could because people aren't even in the space. So it takes courage to stay in there when, again, you give an idea and you say it, and sometimes people act like they didn't even hear it. And so, and my husband has experienced this a lot. And I know this is Women's History Month, but as a Black man, I will say this. He would be an engineer. He has a PhD from Stanford, a bachelor's degree from Duke. He would be in a room where clearly, he belonged in the room. He would make a wonderful idea. And a few minutes later, no one responds. A few minutes later, a white person makes the same suggestion and it's received like, oh, wow, that's great. That's wonderful. And so, a lot of times people just don't want to keep putting up with that. So it takes courage to kind of stay in there and to stay in the fight and to say, okay, even though you may not get it, now sometimes it means that, okay, you don't stay in that environment, but maybe you go start your own thing. And that's where your idea, starts to grow and to bloom and to blossom because it was a great idea. And so, so it takes courage to stay in there. It takes courage to be in classrooms where teachers don't think that you have the ability to be there. So it takes courage to stay in there and to know that sometimes you're going to face discrimination. You might even get graded down on something you do because they know who you are. So it takes courage to persevere in those areas. And, so that, and I think what is to me the hard part in that is that if people don't persevere, and it really is a thing that's your passion, it really is a thing that you were put here on the earth to do, then you walk away from that. And then that's a loss to you and a loss to us. And so I think, so that's why I think it's so important in STEM, because people look at it and they'll say, oh, those classes are hard. Yeah, they may be hard, but you can still do it. And I think that's why it takes some courage to keep pressing on.
You can do hard things. I have that on a sticky note. I have it on my computer because even at the phase of life that I'm in, I have to remind myself that I can do hard things. Um, I love what you said about courage to stay in the fight. You know, when many of us, yourself included, you know, are asked to speak to students and go to these places and talk about our journey. I believe that there's a point where we may be, I'll speak for myself, sometimes, not always. I'm reluctant to share certain stories because I don't want to deter my listeners, my young ears from staying in the fight and staying invested. But I will share that it takes courage to recognize that it is a hard thing. And all it means is that as you continue to pick yourself up and do more hard things, you develop a sort of armor that allows you to withstand the hit that may be coming next. But when we don't activate that courage, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's with your studies, whether you're disciplined, you don't build those tools to be able to use them. You just won't have them. And so I really appreciate that example. Unfortunately, I have too many of those examples of my own, and it still happens to men and women alike. Like you said, it's Women's History Month. It still happens, and when it does happen, one of the things that I want to help my listeners and anyone who has faced this is the courage to not back down, and also the courage to know when to elevate, when to change the atmosphere in the STEM spaces that you're in, and do it with integrity and do it with not leaving bodies in your wake. Because you know that mouth, that tongue can sometimes get us into trouble, and we're already working with opposition. But that's maturity, and that's why one of the reasons why I asked you to be a part of this with me is because you have helped me as a professional look at life and look at situations in such a way where when we're done talking, I'm able to not only strategically understand what my next move is, but I operate out of I can do this. It's hard, it's gonna be challenging, it may even require a different skill, but I can do it. So I really do appreciate, that story so very much. I also wanna ask you, because, you have children, I wanna give you the opportunity to share as much about, your personal life as you want to. I've already kinda alluded to it. So she doesn't keep all this brilliance to herself, she's passed it on. We'll get to that later. I want to ask, is there a person in your life, a person that you know or look up to that exhibits courage, that has really inspired you? And when you think about that individual, you just get more energy for the journey. Who is that person for you?
Wow. So that was when I thought about that. I started thinking about that, and it's funny. I was in another meeting when they asked me if you had to put together your own personal board of directors, who would be your board of directors? And so I thought, oh, that's kind of similar to this. And then I realized I wasn't the only Black person in the room, but as I was starting looking, all the people who were on my board, it turned out at that point, were all Black women. And I said, oh, that's interesting that I was thinking along those lines. And so there are several people that I could talk about. And I'm going to focus on Dr. Lori White, and she's an educator, so she's in the field of education, but she is now the president of DePauw University, and I met her when she was so it's kind of interesting how life turns around a little bit. I met her while she was working on her dissertation, and she was at Stanford, and I had already finished. I was at home at that time, only working part-time, teaching part-time, because I had my kids. I just had my children. And so I was taking a little bit of time. And so someone had told her about me, saying, okay, if you need help with your statistics, you need to go see Diann McCants. And so So I said, okay. So she was working on her dissertation, and really she just needed to talk it through. It was funny. She actually had the answers, but what I found that I could help somebody with is to help them find their answer. And so she just needed to talk through what she was doing and how she was thinking about it, because nobody else was kind of seeing that. So I was like, okay, that's great. So we did, and we met, and it helped her take her to her final step. But then later she was the director of the advising center at Stanford. And so I was working in African American studies, and she said, Diann, I really want you to become part of my team. So it's kind of funny. So you help somebody, and then later on they end up helping you. So I ended up working for her in the space of advising and tutoring, and it was an interesting job, interesting time. What I liked about her is that she had vision, and she knew that and she was facing some adversity in that role, because the person who was her boss, I think he had trouble with strong Black women, and so Dr. Lori White, she's maybe she might be 5 feet, 5'2". So she's this little package, but she's like dynamite. And so he had trouble with that. So eventually she moved on to some other things. And then she was the vice chancellor, the chancellor of student affairs at Washington University in St. Louis. And she said, Diann, I think this is it. This is where I'm going to retire. This is, I feel like I've accomplished all these things I want to do. I've made student life better. Everywhere she goes, she would turn things around. But it took courage to always be kind of that Black woman in a space that didn't have a lot of people that looked like her. And yet she would go in with, you never saw her looking discouraged with them. But again, she'd come back, and we would all have conversations. The network would have conversations to help support. But then, the next thing I know, she says, I'm going to take the job as president of DePaul University. And so it's, number one, she's the first Black woman in that role.
Another first.
Yeah, another first. And you're thinking about, again, where we are in our lives, in our world, another first. And but the courage to say, I'm going to step into this predominantly white university, and I'm going to take on the role of president, and I'm going to show that I can do amazing things. So she would walk in with confidence in every space that she would step into. So, you would never think that this was a tiny person, because she comes in she's 6 feet tall, just with and she also is someone who will tell you the truth. And so I think to me that really speaks a lot to being willing to be in that space, and to know, I think, is that she knows that she's going to make a difference. It's like when she walks in, she's like, I'm about to change your world. And that, and she may not say those words, but that's the courage that she walks into the space with. And so when I look at that, I think, wow, at the times when I feel like at times I sort of stumbled from this place to the next place, or a door, it didn't feel like it was this really focused, I've decided I'm going to be there, and I'm moving there, and I've moved into good spaces that I feel like God has opened those doors. And so I've walked through. But having purpose, having real purpose and confidence in that is what really, I think, really speaks to me.
Wow. You mentioned several characteristics that I believe are in common, not only with women who walk courageously, but how to embody that. So I'm just going to name off a few. Self-aware, honest. In order to be honest and forthright with people, you first have to have that honesty within yourself and know yourself. It's you can tell when it's fake. It's hard to portray that when it doesn't start here. So that's another characteristic. And being able to be resilient. I spoke about it earlier, but it sounds like, based on your description of some of the environments that she's been in, is that she faced adversity. Failure is part of the journey, folks. If you don't know, I'm here to tell you, and don't get disappointed. As long as you're breathing, you are going to stumble and fail. And I'm willing to bet you that Dr. Wright has had some moments where she's had to pick herself back up. And those moments, those situations pick a thing, pick whatever it is. It doesn't have to always be professional. Sometimes it could be personal. The act of picking yourself back up and getting back in the race gives you the endurance for the journey ahead. It just does. So, um, I named 3 characteristics. So again, I'm setting you up for another question. What other 3 characteristics do you believe are necessary to have courage and to live courageously?
Okay, let's see. So we've already talked about, like you said, honesty, um,
Truth. Well, no,
truth.
that's the same.
Yeah,
Failure.
and yeah, and actually, let me speak a little bit on that failure thing just for a second, just to kind of dig a little bit more with that. So um, you have to not be afraid to fail. And the challenge is so like in psychology when we do experiments, that's how we find the information. And when you're doing an experiment, you are, of course, you want to get a significant effect that shows that your hypothesis, you had this idea, you had this hypothesis, you tested it, and you got a significant result, and it shows, yes, now we understand how stereotyping works, or yes, we understand the principles behind discrimination. But in all honesty, the experiments that don't work are just as informative as the ones that do work. And so when the experiments don't work, then you can say, oh, we thought that was the reason that people did such and such and such and such. And we found out that that's not really it. So now let's dig a little bit deeper so we understand what really it is. And so so being not being afraid to fail is really, I think, an important part of learning to lead, learning to persevere in STEM. I think those things are very, very, very critical. I think other characteristics, quite honestly, having a sense of humor, being able to laugh at yourself in the midst of some of the stuff. If you ever come to my house, and I happy to invite people to my house. It's a place that I feel is welcoming, where you can actually come and let your hair down a little bit and everything. But my husband, here we have 2 PhDs, and sometimes we are just as silly as we can be. That it's fun to we'll have a conversation and we'll have fun. We'll have a song will come up, and all of a sudden it's like you've made a corny joke because of a song that it reminded you of, and that sort of thing. And so we enjoy doing that. So having a sense of humor really gets you through a lot of situations, and it helps you to give yourself space. And I think that's the other thing I would say, is to be kind to yourself. Mm-hmm. That every day you should find something kind to say to yourself.
Oh, that's good.
And because sometimes no one else is, but just that you can always say, like today, I had a meeting today that I thought it was going to be a pretty difficult meeting, but in the end, it actually went pretty well. So I said, okay, everything wasn't perfect in that meeting, but there were a lot of things that were really good, and I made some really good points. So I feel pretty good about that. So always find that thing where you can be kind to yourself.
No, I like that. I wrote all of those things down. The sense of humor I can definitely appreciate, because I consider myself next to my partner in life one of the biggest cornballs there is. And I think that having levity and being able to look at yourself not as a joke, but being able to look at yourself and smile at the imperfection, and being able to recognize that at whatever stage of life you are in, we are all works in progress. And I truly want that for my younger brothers and sisters, especially my young girls, because there's a full-on assault for our minds and how we see ourselves, how we view our bodies, our minds, all of it. And if we can shed some light, so I'm talking to the green button again, if I could shed some light here, be kind to yourself, have a sense of humor, love yourself, not be afraid to fail, and be able to understand who you are and speak your truth. How'd I do?
I think that sounds wonderful.
Awesome.
Well, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I am so very thankful and grateful to have Dr. Diann McCants on the platform. Just in case you are interested in reaching out to her, I'm going to throw up this beautiful picture of her along with her name title. You can find her on LinkedIn. I know that she is a very busy person. However, you've heard that she is a wife, she's a mother, she's a hard worker, and a woman of faith, and a minister. And I know firsthand that if you had a question that you wanted to ask her and you wanted to send it to her through message via LinkedIn, that she will probably definitely get back to you. So again, Dr. McCants, I'm gonna take us out on some music. If I can get my volume right. Yes, take us a lovely note of music. I'm hearing some background and some feedback, but that is quite all right. We can just turn the volume a little lower. Again, this is Women's History Month. My name is Karen Mayfield Felton, owner of Feet Planted LLC. You have just had the pleasure to hear from Dr. Diann McCants. She is a phenomenal woman, a woman of faith, a woman leading with courage, and quite frankly, a woman that I am blessed to be able to know. So stand by for more amazing women that you can hear from and learn from. And until we talk again, please be kind and take care of yourself.